At some point, my mother would just take the summer off from work and come up for the whole summer. And my dad came up on the daddy boat. You know, my dad, there was a train called the Night Cape Codder that left from Grand Central in New York. And God knows they should bring it back. It went onto a siding at Woods Hole. And you'd get off the train and walk onto the boat. And that was the last boat on Fridays that got called the daddy boat. And everybody would drive down and meet the daddies who arrived for the weekends. I have never particularly been a beach person. So I would read, and the library used to be right around the corner, so I was surprised there isn't a gully. I used to walk back and forth to the library. And then originally there was Darling's Candy. And then that gave up to Hilliard's, which is now where the Good Ship Lollipop is. And so it would be read and fudge and read and read and fudge. And Darling's used to be at the center of Circuit. And it had a sign. I've read somebody saying it was silver, but I remember it being red and gold, a big sign that said Darling's. And it had, I guess for want of a better word, cabinets that moved out to the street, display things that kind of pushed out. And I don't remember, I'm sure there was an inside, but it had a big old taffy machine where, that pulled the taffy. And it was just fascinating. And then they had these display cases where that had, they used to do a long bar of sort of like caramelized popcorn that was sort of sticky. And if the weather was like it is today, humid, it was really sticky, and it was wrapped in wax paper. And then they did something that has marked my, candy love for life, which was called molasses puff. And you could only get it. They'd only make it at certain times. And I've actually found it in a shop in the south end of Boston. And then they stopped getting it. So I've now discovered that it was actually a British candy. And they're still doing. And it's called, oh, come on, Jessica. It's called honeycomb. And you can get it in the UK. But this was just the chunks of it. And so that was sort of really wonderful. And then what is now the Cottager's Corner was the firehouse. And it had like a honk. And in some of these old kitchens, I've seen, I don't know if anybody even, there's somewhere, and I'm sure the museum has one, but there was a list. 2 honks meant this area, 3 honks meant for people who were volunteer firemen. And so it would honk, and the honks would tell you where to go. And I remember the honking one night, and it was Darling's. There was some kind of a fire. I don't even know what it was, but apparently that night old man Darling died, and I've just recently read that he'd had a heart attack at some point, in the course of the fire and stuff. And so that was the end of Darling's at the middle of the block. And then it moved down to where Murdoch's Fudge is, next door to the Island Theater. And then you could go, and before you went into the theater, you'd get your popcorn, hot buttered popcorn out of an enormous copper kettle. Or they had a kind of almost like confetti popcorn that was brown and pink and white that was sugared popcorn. And then they still had those bars. And yeah, the multicolored popcorn. And then they had caramel popcorn too. And that was, so I was always a Darling's partisan.